Robert Hamilton's mansion stood on a quiet Beverly Hills street, gleaming in the late afternoon sun like a monument to perfection. Every hedge was trimmed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, every window reflected the sky without a single smudge, and the marble driveway stretched forward like a stage prepared for its leading man. Robert liked it that way. He was a man who believed that control and order were proof of success. At 52, he had built his fortune from scratch, turning a small tech idea into an empire. He believed in meritocracy, hard work, discipline, and intelligence. To him, the world rewarded those who earned it. That belief had carried him to the very top. He parked his Tesla quietly in the garage, the hum of the engine fading as he stepped out in his tailored suit. Normally, this moment gave him satisfaction, the return to his private world, far away from the chaos of boardrooms and markets. But today, something pierced the silence of his immaculate home, a sound that did not belong here. It was crying. Not the whining of a spoiled child denied a toy, not the faint sniffles of someone with a scraped knee. This sound was raw, jagged, and filled with desperation. It carried through the polished walls like a broken instrument, each sob scraping against Robert's chest in a way he didn't understand. He froze. For a man who thrived on logic, emotions had always been untidy intrusions. Yet his pulse quickened. He followed the sound through the hallway, past gleaming art pieces and spotless floors, until he reached the laundry room tucked near the back of the house. The door was ajar, and a shaft of California sunlight spilled across the tiled floor. What he saw inside made him stop breathing for a second. On the cold ground, surrounded by torn plastic bags, was Tyler Washington, 8 years old, his maid's son. The boy's small hands were covered in grime, clutching at crumpled papers and food wrappers. His school uniform, once neatly pressed, was stained and wrinkled, his knees marked with dirt from the floor. Tears ran freely down his cheeks, streaking the dust on his skin, but he kept rummaging through the trash with a determination that broke Robert's heart in a way he didn't think was possible. "Tyler?" Robert's voice cracked in the stillness, softer than he intended. "What are you doing here?" The boy startled, quickly trying to wipe his face with the back of his hand, leaving a dark smear across his cheek. His red, swollen eyes lifted toward Robert, and for a moment, shame flickered across his face. "Mr. Hamilton," Tyler whispered, his voice trembling. "They threw it away." His small chest rose and fell too fast, each word shaking as though it carried the weight of the world. "I have to find it before the truck takes it. Please, I have to." Robert stepped into the room, his polished shoes crunching lightly against bits of plastic. He crouched down, the scent of detergent and stale trash filling the air, and tried to steady his voice. "What things, son? What are you looking for?" Tyler's lips trembled as he held up a torn sheet of paper, its edges wet with tears. "My project, my science fair project, and pictures of my mom when she was little. They said it was junk, but it's not. It's not trash." The words hit Robert like a blow he hadn't expected. This was not the voice of a child throwing a tantrum. It was the voice of someone fighting against an invisible enemy, someone who knew what it meant to lose something precious. For the first time in years, Robert Hamilton, billionaire, man of logic and control, felt a crack in the carefully built walls around his heart. And as he looked at Tyler, dirty hands trembling, tears falling onto trash no one else cared about, he realized this was not just about a project. This was about dignity, about dreams, and something deep inside him whispered that his life was about to change forever. The night crept quietly over Beverly Hills, painting Robert Hamilton's mansion in shadows and soft golden light from its chandeliers. But the image of Tyler on the laundry room floor wouldn't leave Robert's mind. Even as he sat down in his leather chair, the boy's trembling voice echoed in his ears. "It's not trash. It's not." The next morning came too soon. Robert walked through the halls of his spotless home, but it no longer looked the same. He thought about the little boy's dirty hands digging through trash bags, his uniform wrinkled, his small face streaked with tears. Robert had seen desperation before, on Wall Street, in failed negotiations, in bankrupt rivals, but never on the face of a child. That image haunted him. He went into the kitchen where Patricia was finishing her morning duties. She wore her usual pressed uniform, her posture perfectly straight, but her eyes carried a tiredness that no amount of sleep could ever fix. Robert had always admired her work ethic. She rarely spoke about her personal life, and he had never asked. But now, for the first time, he realized just how little he truly knew about the woman who quietly kept his house in order. "Patricia," Robert said, his voice more careful than usual, Why was Tyler digging through the trash yesterday? Her hand froze on the coffee pot. She turned slowly, her expression caught between pride and worry. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed and set the pot down. He was looking for his science project, she said softly. We worked on it all week. It was about solar energy. He was so proud of it. Robert frowned. Solar energy? At his age? Patricia nodded with a faint smile, though her eyes were wet. He built panels from recycled bottles and wires he found. He said he wanted to make something that could give poor families light without bills. He stayed up late every night drawing, cutting, gluing, until his little fingers were blistered. Her voice cracked. But yesterday, he came home saying the principal threw it away, called it slum work. The words struck Robert like cold water. She said that? Patricia lowered her gaze. In front of his whole class. Robert's hands curled into fists. He could almost see Tyler's small body standing in front of children, holding his project only to be laughed at and humiliated by the very person meant to guide him. He had fought ruthless battles in boardrooms, but this was cruelty of another kind. Patricia wiped a tear quickly, almost embarrassed to show it. Mr. Hamilton, please, don't trouble yourself. Tyler will do another project. We've lived with things like this before. Things like this? Robert's voice sharpened and Patricia flinched. He lowered it soft but firm. Patricia, tell me what else has happened. Her lips trembled. She looked as though she wanted to stay silent, to keep her pain hidden. But at last, she whispered, he came home last week saying the principal told him kids like him should stop dreaming, that he should accept his place in life. The room fell silent. Robert felt his chest tighten in a way no market crash or corporate betrayal had ever done. His place in life? He repeated, his voice low, dangerous. Patricia nodded, tears slipping now. She said maybe he should think about jobs like gardening or cleaning like me. She told him becoming a scientist wasn't realistic for a child like him. For the first time in decades, Robert Hamilton felt powerless. The man who controlled companies across continents, who signed deals worth billions, who commanded rooms with a single glance, stood in his kitchen, unable to stop the hot sting of rage rising in his chest. He looked out the wide glass window at his manicured lawn, at the perfectly ordered world he had built, and suddenly it all seemed meaningless compared to the injustice inflicted on one child. When he turned back to Patricia, his voice was steady, but his eyes burned. Patricia, listen to me. Tyler is not going to be crushed by this, not while I have anything to say about it. She looked at him with disbelief, almost fear. Please, Mr. Hamilton, I don't want to lose my job, and Tyler can't lose his school. Robert stepped closer, his presence filling the room with a gravity Patricia had never felt before. You and Tyler won't lose anything, I promise you that, but I need to see this school for myself. And in that moment, Robert Hamilton knew he was no longer just a bystander. He had stepped into a battle he hadn't planned for, one that would test not his wealth, but his heart. The next morning, Robert Hamilton drove his Tesla not to his office in downtown Los Angeles, but to a place he had never once bothered to visit in person, Prestige Academy, the private school where Patricia worked herself to the bone to keep her son enrolled. His company's board was waiting for him on a major call, but he ignored it. For the first time in decades, profit margins and stock prices could wait. Something far more urgent demanded his attention. The gates of Prestige Academy swung open at the sight of his car, the security guards straightening instantly. They recognized him, of course. He was one of the wealthiest parents associated with the school, even though his own children were long grown and scattered. But the respect he saw in their eyes meant nothing today. It wasn't for him, it was for his name, his money, and after what Patricia had told him, that very respect felt hollow. The principal's office was lavish, decorated with fine mahogany furniture and framed certificates. A crystal vase of roses sat on the desk, fresh and expensive. Behind that desk sat Principal Elaine Coleman, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a smile trained for charity galas. She stood quickly when Robert entered, her hands clasping as though greeting royalty. Mr. Hamilton, she said warmly, what an honor. To what do we owe this surprise visit? Robert remained standing, his eyes cold. It's about Tyler Washington. The principal's smile faltered just for a second. She smoothed it back into place, but Robert had already seen the crack. Patricia's boy. Yes, a sweet child. He came home yesterday saying you threw away his science project. Coleman tilted her head, as though searching for the right words. Mr. Hamilton, I assure you, it was for the best. The project was inadequate for our standards. It was made from trash materials, Plastic bottles, scraps, hardly the sort of work that represents Prestige Academy at the science fair. Robert felt his blood stir. It worked, he said sharply. He built solar panels that generated energy. Coleman offered a sympathetic sigh, the kind reserved for someone too naive to understand. Yes, but these competitions aren't just about whether something functions. Presentation matters. Professionalism matters. And between us, she leaned forward, her voice lowering into a conspiratorial tone. We need to be realistic about the limitations of certain students. Tyler is bright, of course, but encouraging him to compete with the children of doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs would be cruel. I was protecting him from disappointment. Robert's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Limitations? He repeated. Coleman nodded, her face calm, her voice smooth. Socio-cultural differences, family expectations, limited resources. It is our responsibility to guide children like Tyler toward appropriate paths, solid, respectable work. Technical professions, skilled labor. There is dignity in that. Not everyone can be a CEO like you. For a moment, Robert stared at her in stunned silence. Then, very slowly, he spoke, each word carved from ice. Tyler is 8 years old. He has straight A's in science. His teachers say he is exceptional. And you're telling me his future has already been decided? Because of his background? Coleman gave another of her practiced sighs. Mr. Hamilton, with all due respect, you must understand the realities. Children like him don't have the same foundation. It is kinder to temper their expectations early than to let them dream too big. Robert leaned forward, his voice dropping so low it was almost a growl. Do you know what I built my empire from? Nothing. Less than nothing. I wasn't handed this life, I earned it. And now you dare tell me that an 8-year-old boy should stop dreaming because he was born into the wrong home, because his mother cleans houses instead of running companies. The principal's smile cracked again, but she quickly hid it behind a mask of politeness. Mr. Hamilton, I assure you, my intentions are only to protect him. Protect him, Robert repeated bitterly, tasting the words like poison. He stood, adjusting his jacket. I'll tell you what I see. You're not protecting him. You're protecting the comfort of families who pay to keep their children on top, and you're doing it at the expense of children like Tyler. Coleman's expression stiffened, her mask slipping at last. Be careful, Mr. Hamilton. You're speaking without understanding the complexities of education. But Robert wasn't listening anymore. His heart was pounding with the same rhythm it had when he was a young man, clawing his way through hostile boardrooms where every handshake carried a hidden knife. Except this battle wasn't about profit or power. This battle was about an 8-year-old boy with dirt on his hands and dreams in his heart. As he left the office, Robert's jaw was set, his fists clenched. He hadn't felt this alive, this enraged in years. For the first time in his life, Robert Hamilton wasn't fighting for himself, he was fighting for Tyler. And that fight, he knew, had only just begun. The air inside Robert Hamilton's mansion was unnervingly still that evening. He had just returned from his confrontation with Principal Coleman, his mind replaying her condescending tone again and again, like a bad recording. Limitations, appropriate paths, skilled labor. The words rang in his ears with a venom he couldn't shake. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hand trembled with restrained anger. For a man who prided himself on control, he felt anything but in control tonight. His phone buzzed sharply on the marble countertop. At first, he ignored it, but the persistent vibration drew his attention. The caller ID read Patricia Washington. He answered quickly. Patricia? Her voice came through cracked with panic, and Robert immediately stood straighter. Mr. Hamilton, it's Tyler. They expelled him. They said he stole equipment from the science lab. For a moment, Robert was silent, his jaw tightening until it ached. Expelled? His voice dropped, hard as steel. What exactly did they say? Patricia's breath hitched as though she was struggling to keep her composure. Principal Coleman called me this afternoon. She said Tyler was caught with electronic components in his backpack. Wires, batteries, things from the lab. She claims he admitted it, but Robert, he didn't. My boy would never steal. Her voice broke into sobs. He cried all night saying he didn't do it. Please, you have to believe him. Robert slammed his fist against the counter, the sound echoing through the cavernous room. Of course I believe him, he snapped, more to himself than to her. That woman planted it, or had someone plant it. She wants him gone. When Patricia and Tyler arrived later that evening, the sight of the boy twisted something inside Robert's chest. Tyler sat slumped in the library chair, his uniform wrinkled, his small eyes red from hours of crying. He looked up at Robert with a mixture of shame and fear, clutching the straps of his backpack as though it were both shield and burden. Mr. Hamilton, he whispered, his voice raw, I swear I didn't take anything. Principal Coleman said, Kids like me sometimes do the wrong thing without even realizing it. She said it was better if I confessed so things wouldn't get worse. Robert knelt in front of him, his gaze steady and fierce. Tyler, look at me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand? The boy's chin wobbled as he nodded, though tears spilled down his cheeks again. Patricia, standing nearby, pressed a hand to her mouth, her body trembling. She told him this was instinct, Patricia whispered, that his background makes it natural for children like him to steal when they're in places above their reality. She said it was like putting a wild bird in a golden cage. Robert's chest felt like it was about to burst. His heart hammered with the fury of a man who had spent his life crushing rivals in the corporate arena, but this wasn't business. This was cruelty against a child. He rose and paced to the wide library window, looking out at the manicured lawn bathed in moonlight. All his life, he had thrived on patterns, spotting weakness in systems and exploiting them until he won. And now, for the first time in years, he saw the clearest pattern of all. Coleman wasn't simply harsh. She was systematically dismantling children like Tyler, children who had the audacity to dream. He turned back, his voice steady, his expression carved with resolve. Patricia, Tyler, this ends now. She will not destroy him, not you, not any other child. Shaw is broken. Patricia shook her head, fear clouding her features. Mr. Hamilton, please, she has power. The school has power. I'm just the maid and Tyler's just... No, Robert cut in sharply. Don't ever finish that sentence. He is not just anything. He is brilliant, and I won't let anyone convince him otherwise. The boy looked up at Robert wide-eyed, as though seeing him differently for the first time. Tyler, Robert said, kneeling again so their eyes met. You are one of the smartest children I've ever met, and we're going to prove it, not just to Coleman, but to the world. For the first time that night, the faintest flicker of hope sparked in Tyler's eyes, and as Robert placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, he knew this wasn't a passing act of sympathy. This was war. Coleman had underestimated the wrong man. The following days moved like storm clouds rolling over a silent city. Robert Hamilton couldn't sleep, not because of the endless emails from his company waiting for his approval, but because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tyler's small hands trembling as he swore he hadn't stolen a thing. The boy's voice, fragile but certain, cut deeper than any hostile takeover Robert had ever faced. I swear I didn't take anything. Robert had heard lies before. He could spot them across a boardroom table in seconds. Tyler's eyes, however, had carried no deceit. They had carried something else. Innocence being crushed beneath injustice. It was early morning when Patricia arrived again at the mansion. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back too tightly, her uniform neat but worn thin. Robert noticed how her shoes, polished to shine, were scuffed at the heels from endless hours of work. She clutched Tyler's hand tightly as though afraid someone might come to rip him away. Patricia, Robert said, guiding them into his study, I need you to tell me everything. Not just about Tyler, about this school, about Principal Coleman. She hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line, torn between fear and truth. Finally, she sank into the chair across from his desk, her voice low. Mr. Hamilton, it's not just Tyler. He isn't the first. He's not the only one. Robert leaned forward. Go on. There's Jasmine, Patricia whispered. Her mother runs the cafeteria. That little girl can do math faster than I can count change. But Principal Coleman told her she should stop wasting time with numbers and focus on cooking. Said she should carry her family's real talent. Tyler squeezed his mother's hand. And Marcus, he added softly, his small voice cutting through the heavy silence. He's the security guard's son. He's the best artist in our class. He draws dragons and castles and people so real they look alive. But she told him his style was too poor. She said his art wasn't suitable for contests at a school like ours. Robert felt the muscles in his jaw lock. He could almost hear Coleman's polished voice dismissing their brilliance with a smile. He had underestimated before in his career, but he had never seen underestimation sharpened into a weapon. Patricia lowered her gaze, tears sliding down her cheeks. All of them are scholarship children. All of them are black or from working-class families. And all of them, her voice broke, have been pushed down until they stopped trying. Robert rose from his chair, his body tense, his breath heavy. He walked to the tall window that overlooked his perfectly manicured garden. The roses outside were lined in neat rows, every leaf controlled, trimmed into submission. For the first time, the sight disgusted him. It looked too much like Coleman's version of education, beautiful on the surface, but only because someone had cut away the wild growth that dared to stand out. He turned back to Patricia and Tyler, his voice low but unwavering. Then it's not just He's about Tyler. She's been doing this for years. This isn't incompetence. It's a pattern, a design. Patricia's hands shook as she folded them together. Mr. Hamilton, please don't make enemies of people like her. We can't fight them. I'll lose my job and Tyler will lose every chance I've worked for. Robert walked closer, his gaze firm. Patricia, listen to me. I've fought against men far richer and far more ruthless than Elaine Coleman, and I've never lost. You and Tyler are not alone in this anymore. Tyler's eyes widened, and for the first time, Robert saw a flicker of hope push back against the boy's fear. The child who had been accused, humiliated, and cornered into believing he was less than his worth now sat taller in the chair, watching Robert like he was seeing a lifeline. Robert put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Tyler, do you believe you can still be a scientist? The boy swallowed hard, his voice small but steady. Yes, but she says kids like me shouldn't dream like that. Robert knelt so their eyes were level, his tone sharp as steel. Then we're going to prove her wrong, you hear me? Not just for you, for Jasmine, for Marcus, for every child she's buried under her so-called standards. We're going to show her, and the world, exactly what you can do. Patricia's tears fell freely now, though her lips trembled with something she hadn't felt in a long time, belief. Robert stood, his resolve hardening. For years, he had built his empire on identifying flaws in powerful systems and exploiting them until they collapsed. And now he saw the flaw in Prestige Academy, Coleman's arrogance. She believed no one would ever challenge her. But she had chosen the wrong child to humiliate, and the wrong man to ignore. The morning sun spilled across Beverly Hills like liquid gold, but Robert Hamilton felt no warmth. He had spent the night pacing through his mansion, his mind turning faster than any of his company's servers. He was a man who lived by patterns, by logic, by strategy, and what he had uncovered at Prestige Academy was not random. It was deliberate, systematic. Elaine Coleman wasn't just harsh, she was dismantling children's futures piece by piece, burying their potential under a polite smile and polished lies. Robert was done watching. At exactly 7, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Amanda Rodriguez, a civil rights lawyer whose courtroom victories were whispered about like legends. When she answered, her voice was brisk, sharp, and awake. Robert Hamilton, she said, you only call when you're about to start a war. I already have, Robert replied flatly. This time, it isn't about business, it's about children. I need the best case of your life, Amanda. She didn't hesitate. Tell me everything. For the next 20 minutes, Robert laid out every detail, Tyler's project thrown away, the insults disguised as advice, the theft accusation, the other children, Jasmine, Marcus, and the countless names still buried in silence. When he finished, Amanda's voice was cold steel. That's not just prejudice, that's systemic discrimination. And if she's bold enough to say those things to a child, imagine what she puts in writing. Robert's lips curved into the kind of smile his rivals had always feared, the smile of a man who knew exactly how to win. By mid-morning, he had made 2 more calls. The first was to David Chun, an investigative journalist at the Los Angeles Times who specialized in exposing corruption. David, I have a story for you, but this one isn't about Wall Street or politics. It's about children being broken in the shadow of one of Beverly Hills' most prestigious schools. David's pause on the other end was heavy with intrigue. Do you have evidence? Not yet, Robert admitted, but I will, and when I do, it will burn brighter than anything you've published this year. The second call was to a digital forensics company that Robert had once used to dismantle a rival's accounting fraud. I need you to quietly analyze academic records for Prestige Academy. Look for patterns in scholarship students, grades, transfers, expulsions. Compare them against paying students. And if you find financial irregularities connected to the principal, I want them. The man on the line chuckled darkly. You're planning something big. I'm planning something just, Robert replied. That afternoon, Robert sat with Patricia and Tyler in the mansion's library, spreading out folders across the polished oak table. Tyler's projects were there, carefully saved by Patricia, small wonders built with recycled scraps but brimming with genius. Working circuits, chemical reactions, solar panels designed from bottles and foil. Each one whispered of a child who saw the world differently, who believed science could be for everyone. Robert lifted a solar panel Tyler had made, its edges crooked but its core functional. This isn't junk, he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. This is vision. Patricia wiped her eyes, torn between pride and fear. Mr. Hamilton, what are you going to do? Robert looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, His eyes carried something beyond businesslike distance. They carried fire. I'm going to tear down the walls she built, brick by brick, and when I'm done, every child like Tyler will walk through those doors without being told to stay in their place. That night, Amanda delivered a small recording device, thin, sleek, and nearly invisible. She placed Aj on the table like a weapon. Get her talking, Robert. People like Coleman always reveal themselves. They think they're untouchable. Robert slid the device into his pocket, the weight of it oddly comforting. It wasn't just technology, it was justice waiting to be born. The very next morning, he walked through the gleaming halls of Prestige Academy once more. Students moved aside respectfully, teachers nodded with forced smiles, but Robert barely saw them. His focus was singular. When he stepped into Coleman's office again, she rose with that same polished smile. Mr. Hamilton? Twice in 1 week? What a rare honor. Robert returned her smile, calm, deliberate. I thought we should discuss Tyler's future again. The device in his pocket was already recording, and though Coleman didn't know it, every word she was about to say would become the rope that would hang her career. Robert Hamilton sat in Principal Coleman's office as though he had all the time in the world, his posture relaxed, his voice steady. In truth, his heart was pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. The small device in his pocket was running, every syllable being recorded, every polished lie being preserved as evidence. He had spent his life orchestrating deals worth billions, but this was the most important negotiation of his life. And it wasn't about profit. It was about an 8-year-old boy whose dreams had been thrown into the trash. Coleman folded her hands on her desk, tilting her head with that air of practiced authority. Mr. Hamilton, I understand your concern for Patricia's son. But as I explained before, these competitions require more than enthusiasm. Tyler's project may function in theory, but it was not refined, not competitive enough. Robert's jaw tightened. He forced his voice to remain calm, and you told him it was slum work, that he should stop dreaming. Coleman's smile barely faltered. Sometimes a firm word spares a child years of disappointment. Imagine how cruel it would be to encourage him to compete against children with professional tutors, access to labs, family networks in science and technology. Tyler does not come from that world. Her words slid out like venom cloaked in silk. Robert leaned back, studying her. So you believe his birth decides his future? Coleman's voice lowered, conspiratorial. Mr. Hamilton, you know as well as I do that not everyone is born with the same foundation. Children like Tyler are better served when guided toward realistic paths. Honest work, trades, things that honor their background. It is not prejudice, it is kindness. Robert let silence hang for a moment, as if he were considering her words, but inside he was burning. Every phrase, every carefully chosen justification was damning. He didn't interrupt. He let her speak more, let her dig deeper, and she did. Take Jasmine, for example, Coleman continued, her voice smooth. She has a gift for numbers, but really, what future will she have in mathematics? Better she stays close to her family's skills in food service. It's what she knows. Or Marcus, with his drawing. Talented, yes, but not in a way that fits the standards of this school. It is my duty to guide them back to reality. Reality. Robert felt bile rise in his throat. He had heard powerful men disguise greed as practicality, arrogance as tradition, but hearing it aimed at children whose only crime was being born poor or black, lit something inside him he hadn't felt in years. When he finally stood, his smile was razor thin. Thank you, Principal Coleman. You've given me clarity. She looked up at him, faintly puzzled, but still confident. I trust you understand my position now. I want what is best for these children. Robert's eyes were like ice. No, you want what is easiest for yourself. He left her office without another word, but the recording device in his pocket felt heavier than gold. That evening, Amanda Rodriguez listened to the playback in Robert's study, her brows furrowing deeper with every second. When it ended, she leaned back, her expression fierce. This isn't just enough for a lawsuit. This is enough to dismantle her career. David Chun, the journalist, was there too. He tapped his pen against his notepad, eyes gleaming. And if my team uncovers the financials you requested, this won't just be about discrimination. It'll be about corruption. A system designed to bury kids like Tyler so wealthy families could protect their own. Robert looked at Tyler, who sat curled up on the couch with his hands folded in his lap, listening without fully understanding. The boy's eyes still carried shadows from the accusation, but there was something else there now. Trust. Robert knelt beside him, lowering his voice. Tyler, I need you to be strong for a little longer. We're building something that will show everyone exactly how brilliant you are. Do you believe me?" Tyler's lip trembled, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." Robert placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his gaze never wavering. "Good. Because when we're finished, no one will ever call your dreams trash again." And in that dimly lit study, with the evidence in hand and allies at his side, Robert Hamilton felt the thrill of battle rise inside him. He had torn apart empires before, but now he was tearing down something even darker. Elaine Coleman thought she was untouchable. She thought her words would vanish in silence, her cruelty buried beneath polite smiles. But Robert was going to make sure her voice echoed in every courtroom, every newspaper, every parent's mind until her empire of prejudice collapsed. The war had begun. Friday morning dawned bright over Beverly Hills, but the air around Prestige Academy was heavy with tension. From a distance, the school gleamed like a fortress of excellence. See, white columns, polished stone, and banners fluttering proudly in the breeze. But Robert Hamilton knew the truth now. He knew what lay beneath that perfect surface: silence, fear, and broken dreams. And today, he intended to tear the mask away. The plan had been carefully laid out with Amanda Rodriguez and David Chun. Amanda had worked through the night filing injunctions and civil rights complaints, her legal arsenal ready for deployment. David's team at the Los Angeles Times had their cameras primed, their pens sharpened, waiting for the moment the story broke. Robert had used his connections to ensure that when the truth came out, the entire city would hear it. He pulled his car into the circular drive, stepping out in a gray suit that cut the morning light sharply. Patricia walked beside him, still in her work uniform, though her eyes carried a strength Robert hadn't seen before. And between them was Tyler, dressed neatly, his backpack strapped tight. His small hand clutched Robert's fingers like a lifeline. Parents and students turned as the trio walked up the front steps. Whispers rippled through the courtyard. Why was the Hamilton name here? Why was the Maid's son walking beside him? And why were reporters gathering just beyond the gates? Inside the main hallway, Principal Coleman stood waiting. Her smile was fixed, but her eyes betrayed unease. "Mr. Hamilton," she said, voice dripping with false warmth. "Back again? I was just about to call you. We need to discuss Tyler's unfortunate behavior." Robert raised a hand, cutting her off. His voice carried across the polished floors like thunder. "No more lies, Principal Coleman. We're here to discuss your behavior." Cameras clicked. A microphone appeared over Robert's shoulder. Parents gathering for morning drop-off turned, drawn to the sharpness in his tone. Coleman blinked, her face stiffening. "I beg your pardon." Amanda stepped forward, her heels striking the floor with authority. She held up a thick folder. "Elaine Coleman, as of this morning, you are the subject of a civil rights investigation. We have evidence of systematic discrimination against scholarship students, particularly Black and working-class children, at this institution." A murmur swept through the crowd. Teachers froze in place. Coleman's composure cracked, though she forced a laugh. "That's absurd. I have dedicated my life to education. This is a prestigious school." "And yet," David Chun interrupted, pulling out a tablet, "we have recordings of your exact words. Would you like to hear them?" He pressed play, and Coleman's voice filled the marble hallway, unmistakable. "Kids like Tyler should accept their place in life and stop dreaming about things that aren't for their social class." Gasps erupted. Parents turned toward each other, faces pale. Teachers stood rooted in shame. Coleman's hand flew to her throat, her voice shaking. That is taken out of context. I was simply guiding." But another clip played. "Children of that background are better suited for manual work. Encouraging them to dream beyond their means is cruel." The silence was suffocating. Then from the crowd, a mother's voice cut through. "My God. Patricia, I never knew. Forgive us." Coleman's face turned ashen. "You can't just—" Robert stepped forward, his presence commanding. Tyler clung to his hand but stood tall, his eyes fixed on the woman who had humiliated him. "You accused an 8-year-old boy of theft," Robert said, each word sharp as glass. "You threw his dreams into the trash. You told his mother that ambition was unrealistic for families like theirs. But today, everyone will know the truth. You weren't protecting children. You were destroying them." Amanda raised the folder again. 17 documented cases in the Lossing. 5 years. All scholarship children. All pushed out, silenced, or humiliated. And we have proof of financial irregularities. Donations made directly into your account from wealthy families who didn't want their children competing with talent from poorer homes. The crowd exploded in whispers. Coleman's composure shattered. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. "This is slander, lies. I was doing my duty. Robert's eyes narrowed. His voice was calm, but it cut through the noise with deadly precision. Your duty was to protect every child under your care. Instead, you sold prejudice and called it guidance. And now the world will see you for what you are. Coleman tried to step back, but microphones and cameras boxed her in. David recorded every second, capturing her panic, her sputtering denials. Parents who had once trusted her now glared with disgust. Teachers lowered their heads in shame. And through it all, Tyler stood silently, his small chest rising and falling with the steady breath of someone who knew justice was finally near. At last, Coleman screamed, "You've ruined everything!" Robert leaned closer, his voice low, but everyone could hear him. "No, you ruined yourself the moment you told children their dreams belonged in the trash." And with that, Amanda handed over the court order. Investigators moved in, officials stepped forward, and the once unshakable Principal Elaine Coleman was led away under the gaze of the very children she had silenced. Tyler squeezed Robert's hand, whispering with a mix of relief and awe, "She can't hurt us anymore?" Robert looked down at him, his chest tight with emotion. "No, son, not anymore. Not you, not Jasmine, not Marcus, not anyone." Outside, the reporters swarmed, their cameras capturing every angle. But Robert didn't care about headlines. He cared about the small boy beside him who had just learned that dreams key. He would survive, even in the face of cruelty. The courtyard of Prestige Academy was no longer a place of polished pride. It had transformed into a stage of reckoning. Parents clustered in tight circles, whispering furiously. Students stood frozen, wide-eyed, their morning routines shattered. Teachers, some pale with shame and others stiff with defensiveness, lingered at the edges. And in the center of it all, Elaine Coleman's empire of polished lies crumbled before her eyes. The investigators had arrived quickly, armed with warrants. Amanda Rodriguez oversaw the process with sharp precision, her voice crisp as she directed officials to the records office and Coleman's private files. David Chun's camera crew followed the movements like hawks, capturing every box of documents carried out, every frantic protest Coleman made. "This is harassment," she cried, her voice high and desperate. "You're twisting my words. I was protecting those children." Robert Hamilton stood calmly, his hands clasped behind his back, watching her unravel. He didn't need to raise his voice. Coleman was destroying herself without his help. But when he looked down at Tyler, standing small but unflinching beside him, he knew there was still one more truth that had to be spoken. "Tyler," Robert murmured, bending down so only the boy could hear. "Do you want to say something? Not for me, not for her, for yourself." Tyler's wide eyes flickered with fear, then something steadier. "Courage," he nodded. Robert straightened and gently guided the boy forward. The crowd fell silent. Reporters lowered their microphones, sensing something raw was about to unfold. Coleman froze mid-protest, her eyes narrowing as the 8-year-old boy she had humiliated walked up to face her. Tyler's voice shook at first, but each word grew stronger. "Aunt Coleman," he said softly, "why did you say my project was trash? Why did you tell me kids like me shouldn't dream?" The silence that followed was crushing. Even the investigators paused, their pens hovering in midair. Coleman's mouth opened, then closed again. Her practiced eloquence, her sharp defenses, failed her under the weight of a child's simple question. She stammered, I was only trying to..." But Tyler didn't let her finish. His small fists clenched at his sides, his voice rising. "My mom worked with me every night on that project. We built solar panels from bottles because we don't have money for fancy things. But it worked. It made light. You didn't even look at it. You just called it slum work. Do you know how that feels? To work so hard and have someone throw your dream in the trash?" His words cracked through the air like thunder. Parents gasped. Several mothers put hands over their mouths. One father shook his head in disgust, muttering, "My God." Patricia stood nearby, tears streaming down her face, pride and pain tangled together. Tyler took a shaky breath and continued, "And then you said I stole things. You made me feel like no matter what I did, I'd always be wrong. But I didn't steal. I just wanted to learn. I just wanted to try. Why? Why couldn't you let me try?" The boy's voice broke on the last word, but his small frame stood tall. His innocence was now strength, his tears a testament. And in that moment, the crowd no longer saw just a child. They saw the mirror of every child Coleman had silenced. Coleman's face crumpled. She raised her hands as if to defend herself, but her words faltered under the weight of so many eyes. I was misunderstood." Amanda stepped in sharply, her tone cutting. "No, Elaine, You were understood perfectly. Your words condemned you. Tyler's truth has done what the law and evidence will finish, shown everyone who you really are. The officials moved closer, handing Coleman the official suspension notice. Her tweets. Your career collapsed into a single sheet of paper. She staggered, clutching it as if it could hold her world together, but her world was already gone. As the investigators escorted her away, reporters shouted questions, parents whispered accusations, and teachers stared at their shoes. And in the middle of the storm, Robert placed his hand on Tyler's shoulder. You did that, Robert said quietly. Not me. You. Tyler looked up at him, tears still in his eyes, but a faint smile trembling on his lips. For the first time in weeks, he no longer looked like a boy crushed by shame. He looked like a boy who had found his voice. Patricia came forward, wrapping her arms around her son. I'm so proud of you, she whispered into his hair. The crowd began to shift. Parents who had stayed silent now walked toward Patricia, offering apologies, some with tears in their eyes. One mother took her hand. Forgive us for not seeing, for not speaking sooner. For the first time, Patricia stood tall, her chin lifted. She was no longer just the maid in uniform. She was the mother of a boy who had just shattered the walls of prejudice with nothing but his truth. Robert watched it all unfold, and a quiet certainty settled inside him. Coleman was finished, but this was only the beginning. 6 months later, the roar of applause thundered through the Los Angeles Convention Center, shaking the rafters like a storm. On stage, standing behind a wooden podium that looked far too big for his small frame, was 8-year-old Tyler Washington. His hands trembled slightly as he held the first-place trophy from the California State Science Fair. The polished gold gleamed under the stage lights, but nothing shone brighter than the boy's smile. His voice, once small and hesitant, carried firmly into the microphone. I want to dedicate this award to my mom, he said, glancing toward the front row where Patricia sat, her uniform replaced with a crisp navy suit, tears streaming freely. She worked Ed 3 jobs so I could stay in school. She never stopped believing in me, and I want to dedicate it to Mr. Hamilton, because he taught me that dreams don't have a color and they don't belong in the trash. The audience rose to their feet. Parents, teachers, judges, and students alike clapped until their palms stung. Camera flashes lit the hall as journalists scribbled furiously. On stage, Tyler stood tall, not the frightened boy who once dug through garbage bags with dirty hands, but a young scientist whose idea for low-cost solar panels had already captured the interest of universities and clean energy companies. Patricia wept openly, her chest heaving with sobs of joy. For years she had carried the weight of silence, watching her son's light nearly crushed under prejudice. Now she watched him shine so brightly that no one could deny it. Beside her, Robert Hamilton clapped slowly at first, then harder, pride burning in his eyes. He had sat through countless award ceremonies, banquets, and shareholder meetings, but never had he felt his chest swell like this. When the ceremony ended, Tyler rushed down the steps and threw himself into his mother's arms. Patricia hugged him fiercely, whispering, You've changed everything, my boy. Everything. Robert approached and Tyler turned, lifting the trophy toward him. Mr. Hamilton, Tyler said breathlessly, we did it. Robert crouched to meet his gaze, resting a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. No, Tyler, you did it. All I did was make sure the world saw what I already knew, that you are extraordinary. Patricia stepped closer, her voice trembling. Mr. Hamilton, I don't know how to thank you. Robert shook his head, his voice quiet but resolute. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll never stop fighting for him, and for others like him. Because this isn't just about one science project, Patricia, it's about rewriting the rules for every child told they don't belong. Her eyes widened as his words sank in. She knew then that the millionaire who once prided himself on order and control had been transformed. He was no longer just Robert Hamilton, CEO of a global empire. He was the founder of something far more powerful. 2 weeks later, the Hamilton Educational Foundation officially launched, offering full scholarships to gifted children from working-class families, with a focus on those like Tyler who had been dismissed by prejudice. Patricia was named its executive director, her dignity restored, her voice amplified. Applications poured in, stories of brilliance ignored by systems that had never given them a chance. Elaine Coleman's name, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale. Disgraced, stripped of her credentials, and facing charges of fraud, she now worked quietly in a small bookstore, avoiding the eyes of those who recognized her as the principal who had once sold prejudice for profit. But Robert didn't waste time on her downfall. His eyes were fixed firmly on the future, on Tyler and children like him. He had discovered something more valuable than money, the power to turn injustice into revolution. That evening, after the science fair, Robert drove Patricia and Tyler back to the mansion, The sunset painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, the city glowing beneath them. Tyler fell asleep in the back seat, his trophy clutched tightly in his arms. Patricia sat in silence, overwhelmed, her tears drying into a quiet smile. Robert glanced at them through the rearview mirror, his chest tightening. He had lived in a fortress of wealth and order, but this boy, this child who once searched through trash for his stolen dream, had cracked it open and let something raw and human pour through. As he pulled into the driveway, he whispered to himself, almost like a vow, greatness has no address, no color, no last name. And for the first time in years, Robert Hamilton felt alive, not because of what he owned, but because of what he had chosen to fight for. The story of the boy in the laundry room was no longer just about loss. It was about hope, and hope, once lit, could never be thrown away.